Hi, we're Future Worlds, the on-campus startup accelerator at the University of Southampton. Thanks for joining our podcast today. I'm Iles, Tech Acceleration Manager, and today I'm joined by Agnieszka. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Agnieszka Janeczek, co-founder and CEO of Renovos, a spin-out from University of Southampton.
So, Agnieszka, before you were co-founder of Renovos, what were you doing?
Sure. So I finished my PhD in the group that we ended up spinning out from, but I was actually on a short postdoc trying to find my way into actually more translational research. So what really got us going with Renovos is the university professor really wanting to see his legacy being commercialized. So I applied for this program called iCure by Z-Square. So it's innovation to commercialization of university research. And I never looked back after jumping on that journey.
So did that link into the research you were doing as part of your PhD?
No, so I was working in the group and Richard, the professor, was my co-supervisor, but I was working on nanoparticle delivery of drugs, so still within the bone and orthopedic regeneration sector. However, the company ended up working on the variety of technologies initially from the group, and recently really zoning into the nanoclay technology, which we're pursuing.
Okay. Do you want to tell me a little bit how that nanoclay works and like what you do at Renovos?
Sure. So I'm one of the co-founders of Renovos and a CEO for 3 years now. So I'm running the startup. And we're trying to further develop and commercialize a novel therapeutics delivery platform based on a synthetic nanoclay. So this is kind of a biomaterial approach, which encourages cell ingrowth for tissue regeneration, but also it can deliver and crucially retain therapeutic agents at the site of repair. So there's no release from the material. It can deliver a much lower dose and you don't have the side effects because it's localized.
Oh, wow. Okay. So is this already being used by patients?
No, so we're still in preclinical development, and it is a very long journey for life science startup, especially in kind of the medical field. So we're be ready for first in human testing in 1.5 years' time.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it's coming around then.
It's coming around. There's a lot of trials that we have to do still in the preclinical models, and a lot of regulatory and compliance work that we have to do to make sure that we put the material safely into patients.
Oh, amazing. So how have you found that journey from being PhD student, postdoc to CEO of a company?
I've really enjoyed it. So it's really thrilling. No day is the same. And in a small company and still being a spin out, it's all hands on deck. So you get to learn in a variety of disciplines. So it's very interesting. And still being so close to science. I'm a biomedical scientist by background, so I still like to be kind of directing our scientific progress as well. So it's been really thrilling and I wouldn't look back.
Was that something you ever thought you would do? You know, did you ever see yourself becoming a startup founder?
I always wanted to do translational research. I wanted to work on something that's going to reach the patient one day. So it was always a passion of mine to work on something that can be potentially commercialized. So that's what I'm doing, and that's what I'm enjoying every day.
I mean, it's great. You sound very positive about it, but I guess there probably are some things that you found a little bit hard along the way. So what are some of the sort of biggest challenges you've come up against?
Sure. So I guess looking back, the first challenges were around getting the first funding to the startup. So we've been heavily applying for grants both on the university side when we were still pre-spin out, and also later on the commercial side, on the company side. So getting that early funding, finding much funding from investors, that was the biggest challenge initially. And there'll be many solutions now around the startup environment where there's certain funds affiliated with universities that can help that process, because that is really one of the biggest hurdles, especially when it comes to a startup which requires quite a lot of funding to get to commercial stage. That would be the biggest hurdle initially. Later on, obviously, certain technical hurdles, but with a great scientific team, where we're positioned to really overcome them fairly quickly. So,
I think there's a lot of people saying around being a startup founder, the work-life balance and actually just being able to have a life and be a human, how has that been for you?
Sure. So initially, it is really, really hard work to get everything started and going, and especially getting the team around. So it's not you doing everything yourself, but I just see it. I'm not sure whether there is something like a work-life balance. I think it has to just intercalate, and you have to accept that you have to make both work. And for some time now, I've managed to succeed. Actually, I've got a 3-year-old.
Okay.
So throughout fundraising, managed to also have a baby, and it is possible. You can make the two worlds work.
So working in, as you say, like a startup that needs sort of like clinical trials and working with patients is quite a long timeline. So how has that gone for you? Like, where did you start? How long has it been going now?
So when we spun out from the university, which was 6 years ago, and consider I was working on it for 7 years before even the formation of the company on the IQ program. It really takes a long time. So you're in it for the long journey. So you have to really be motivated to do that. But when we spun out, we had a patent. We had an idea of where the material can be applied for and kind of which indication. Throughout the journey and the development process, we kind of went back to the drawing board a few times and considered which markets are the biggest, which indications are the best, which patient populations present the biggest unmet needs. So that's really kind of the focus. Well, who's the customer, even though we obviously change the value story and talk to the various physicians who are really end customers plus patients. It really takes a long time to get that story right, and the various other components. So in a medical startup, we need to know what it takes to develop this. So we need to know what sort of testing we need to do, and that's informed by which markets we're going for. Because, for example, at Renovos, we're going to commercialize it initially in the US. It's an easier regulatory pathway for us at the moment. So that then directs the type of testing we have to do to really get it to patients. But at the same time, you still have to secure funding when you're developing your product. And to secure funding, you need to have the whole story. So not only the technical bits, but also market access, later reimbursement, who's going to pay for the technology, how the hospital systems are going to pay for it. And also, the whole clinical planning up till the exit. You have to have the whole story together with manufacturing, with scale up. So a really, really big business case to be able to secure investment to actually get one milestone at a time.
Yeah. So did you take investment just from like grant funding, or did you look at like venture capital or angel investors?
Sure. So we've had angel investors, and we're fortunate to have them. They helped unlock the grant funding we secured. So what really got the process of Renovos being spun out from the university was our first Innovate UK grant. So we've raised investment, and subsequently, nearly every summer, we've been raising further rounds of investment. We don't actually have any VCs on our cap table. It's angels, it's family offices. I've secured investment from Orthopedic Research UK, a charity. We're their first ever equity investment. Mm-hmm. And recently we've also been fortunate enough to have a corporate backer. So we also have equity investment from Biocomposites UK, wow, who have kind of a similar heritage to us, trying to commercialize a industrial type material into a medical device for kind of the orthopedics applications.
Oh, that's cool. So how did you go about finding angel investors that would be, appropriate for you?
So it's a lot of networking, a lot of various events. I've been pitching at various angel clubs, but mostly it's really networking, other founders securing money from angels. That's how you find out who else to talk to, mm-hmm, who else is interested specifically in investing in the medical field.
So you're part of a wider team at Renovos. So tell me a little bit about who's there and what they do.
So when we started, it was really just us founders for founders. So there was the university professor, Richard Arefo. There was John Dawson, who was a PI back then. Now he's a university professor in Southampton as well. So they're our kind of technical founders, and they remained at the university side and act as CSO and CTO to the company. I was fortunate enough to have a commercial founder. So he's been my mentor, and he's geared me up for becoming a CEO of Renovos. and he's been, we've been working really closely together ever since. Then we always had stacks of various types of advisors. So we went through various types of incubators and accelerators in our journey, which have been really helpful because it's all about the network and getting the right type of advice around you. So we have non-executive directors that advise us kind of on the commercial side and also on the compliance and regulatory side. Lots of additional advisors or ad hoc on the regulatory, again, reimbursement side, plus a technical team. And we've been fortunate enough to run various grants in collaboration with the university. So it's not only our own technical team, but also the university technical team implementing and helping and developing this technology further. So it's been a great journey. We have various types of scientists going through our labs. We're really looking forward to growing the team further now.
Oh, that's great. Because you mentioned ICURE earlier, but is there any other, what are some of the other sort of resources that you use?
Sure. So after ICURE, we've actually settled down at the University Science Park. So we went through the accelerator, the Catalyst, and that really helped us develop the business case and the business plan that helped us apply for the Innovate UK funding. So it added all the extra elements, plus really working on that value proposition design. We went through a few other accelerators. I think the most recent one is MedTech Innovator in the US, a very US-focused program for early stage companies, but with a bit more than an idea. And I guess maybe the advice I would give to anyone thinking about accelerators and incubators, go where you have the right type of advice. So that one's MedTech specific. We couldn't have been better positioned and had found a better fit for an accelerator program. We went through some other accelerators such as creative destruction labs, for example, but we really need to find a good fit where the mentors are there to advise specifically for your technology.
So the research you're working on is really innovative products. So what actually is it?
So it's a synthetic nanoclay material. We call it Renovite because we manufacture it in our own labs. It's a material that can deliver biologics and retain them. So it's like a gel, you can imagine, that you inject into your body, and it encourages your cells to move into the material. They get then exposed to the drug that was delivered, and the drug tells them to form tissue in that space. So wherever you injected the gel, it turns into your new tissue. And when we're thinking about orthopedics, our first indications are in bone healing. It will form bone where you inject it. And the technology offers, as I said, unprecedented retention of the therapeutics. So there's no slow, staggered, or burst release from the material, meaning the protein, which normally causes a lot of side effects and is used at very high concentrations, can be retained safely and without causing any of these additional side effects at a lower but effective still dose. So you would have bone forming efficiently at a reduced dose.
So what is exactly a nanoclay?
Sure. So it's a synthetic type of silicate material, and those nanoclays are actually an industrial type material. So they're used as rheology modifiers. They're used in spray paint formulations. They cover BMW cars to some degree in pharmaceuticals, but also in cosmetics. So you would find them in shampoos and toothpaste because they're rheology modifiers. But we're taking that technology and formulating them in gels that can safely retain therapeutic agents. And when I say therapeutic agents, that will be proteins, small drug molecules, even up to cells, for a variety of applications in tissue regeneration.
So where would you see your technology being used in patients?
At the moment, there's this product called BMP2, and it's used in patients who have disc degenerative disease due to trauma, other situations. They might require a spinal fusion procedure. So we want to deliver that protein in a much safer and much more effective way. So currently the product, and it's a 20-year-old product by Medtronic, is the protein is being delivered on a collagen sponge. It leads to burst release of the protein. It has a very short half-life, which means it's not active for very long. So a very high dose has to be incorporated in the material. And the problem with that is it's not well retained, so the protein migrates outside of the delivery site, and it's such a potent molecule, it will form bone outside of your skeleton because it tells your stem cells to become bone cells. And the issues with that are sometimes bone forms outside of the skeleton, traps nerves. When the protein is delivered for a cervical spinal fusion procedure, so on your neck level, the high doses lead to lots of soft tissue inflammation. And at that level, that leads to difficulty swallowing, also difficulty breathing, which led to a black box FDA warning for that protein in certain patient populations, such as diabetic, obese, smokers, or just the elderly, which take much longer to heal their bone. That protein is really a wonder drug. So it's a matter of delivering in a safe and effective way. And that's really what we're doing at Renovos. So we're delivering it in our nanoclay material. So it's an injectable application, which is really easy to apply with precision. The protein is well retained at the delivery site, so bone only forms where the gel was injected to, and in time is completely biodegraded and replaced with your new bone tissue. So that's our first product and our first application, but the potential for this nanoclay material, nanoclay gel, to deliver and safely retain a variety of molecules is really vast. So we've tried and tested differently sized and charged molecules, and we can see applications beyond spine fusion and orthopedics, and also beyond bone and joint healing, really. Looking at skin wound applications, but also outside of regenerative medicine. But even that first product used outside of the spine would help, for example, with wrist fractures, ankle fractures. There's a lot of unmet needs in bone regeneration. So, lower cost of goods because we're putting a much lower dose in the material will allow us for kind of extended marketing strategies also outside of spine case use.
So ultimately, this could be used to build like any part of your body in theory, right? So you could be impacting lives in an incredible way.
Yeah, well, regenerative medicine has long really tried to deliver that promise. It's a long term to developing these type of products. It holds a lot of promise, but there's lots of technical difficulties that still have to be overcome. But hopefully with that safer retention and delivery of the biologics, we're one step closer to that promise.
I mean, obviously you do this because it's something you're really passionate about and you care about it. But it's a long road. Like you say, you've already been working on it for 7 years. You're maybe a year and a half away from using it in patients. How do you stay motivated to work on something? And also, as you say, you come up against hurdles. Like, how do you push through?
Yeah, I think that's the part of the PhD inside of me, which is trying to go past those hurdles and persevere and still stay motivated and know that it's just a technical challenge most of the time. So it's, I feel passionately about trying to see the first patients really be treated with this material. So I'm really motivated to drive this forward. But yes, it is a long journey. And I guess when you look back, initially finding that indication, deciding what type of testing we have to do, in this sort of technology application, you do some sort of animal testing as well. So deciding how that has to look like, what the endpoints are, what sort of safety biocompatibility testing we have to run, to which standards. There's certain guidelines, but in the end of the day as well, it's the sponsors that have to decide what's the best route forward for their product. So there's a lot of, still very, very scientific journey ahead of us and scientific planning there. But there's so many other components that I find really interesting on the marketing side and the positioning of the product, and there's a lot of pitching, there's a lot of presentation and different types of presentations. And I really like talking to clinicians about the technology. Always have to still, ask them about many aspects that you thought were really boring, like handling of the material, how it will be packaged, how it will be sterilized. So there's a lot of things that just are part of the journey, but it's getting us that one step closer to the patient. So it's still an exciting journey.
I guess, like you say, when you're working in a startup, you get to see a lot more of these areas because you kind of have to do everything, which is really interesting to see. Is it your ambition, though, because I know you said you're starting out in the US, but do you hope that one day like this will be available on the NHS for people?
Yeah, sure. So we're pursuing the FDA journey because of the medical device regulations in Europe and the many hurdles it poses on medical device developers specifically. So also, in our case, we're combining a device with a biologic. There's different regulatory paths with the FDA and with Europe. With Europe, we'll have to go down most likely the drug pathway. In US will be device. So there's a different length of development and there's different requirements for clinical trials and the number of patients for both. So usually device pathway is slightly shorter, and we want to obviously make it available in other markets once we prove that we can get it commercialized in once.
So you talked a lot about obviously getting into patients, you have to run clinical trials. Could you tell me a little bit about what that actually means?
We've got a lot of experts around us and advisors on that side. You also normally use a clinical research organization to help you plan, design, and execute the trials. So they will be recruiting the patients, they will be preparing the patient consent forms, doing the analysis, the database. We're at the stage where we're planning our clinical trials right now. So we want to run our plan through the FDA to make sure that we're covering all the necessary points that we need to cover. And once that starts, really, you start enrolling your patients. We need to do for a medical device and the pathway that we're taking with the FDA that we'll be required to do 2 types of trials, a pilot of probably about, around 20 patients or so, that will then turn into a pivotal study of probably about even 300 patients. Those trials are quite lengthy. We think about spinal fusion procedure. Those endpoints can be 12 to 24-month endpoints. And you have to enroll these patients. So even though you think you have a 2-year endpoint, you have to obviously plan additional years for really the study summary and making sure that you enroll the right patients. So the clinical research organization, the CRO, helps you plan which sites to use, which clinicians to use. Obviously, we need to target the places where the protein is being used in the type of procedure, exact procedure that we're going to most commonly. So that's also something that the CRO helps us with, and also something that we're researching actively through our clinical network too.
So you're actually going to be doing it on patients that are having these like spinal fusions?
Yes.
Okay, wow, that's exciting. So like how much of a, I know this is just like the first application, there'll be lots more to come, but how much of a problem is that? As in how many people have to have sort of spinal fusions every year?
So there's different levels of spine that can be done at. It's estimated that it's something, in the US alone, it's something more than 600,000 spinal fusion procedures per year.
Wow.
So that's a huge amount because there's many indications and many health issues that lead to having a spinal fusion, even though that's usually kind of a last resort in the patient care pathway. But there's still a big need, and there's a big need with making them efficient and not having the rework done. These are very costly procedures. Spine procedures are the most costliest procedures in the healthcare as well. So making sure we can deliver a biologic product that takes that into consideration and offers, a competitive pricing as well, will enable, more patients access to this sort of product.
Oh, that's awesome. So once you've done your clinical trials and you're actually using this with patients, what's kind of next for Renovos and yourself?
I think with regards to our kind of exit timeline, we think that after the first in-human data, we'll be looking for a potential acquirer or licensee of the business. If not, we're already positioning ourselves to be able to secure the next funding round to do even larger clinical trial and reach a commercial stage. So there's various opportunities and various scenarios at play, and we'll see which one's best at the time when we get there.
You spun out of the university with your professors. What's your relationship like with the university now? Do you still see them? Do you still see the research group? Do you think it's inspiring people?
We have a very close contact with the university group. We have access to their facilities through the various grants that we're running. I've got a personal Future Leaders Fellowship that's actually also based with the university as a partner. So there's lots of interaction with the staff from the Bone and Joint Research Group, where we spun out from, really. And there's a lot of intercalated research. We're sponsoring a bursary for a PhD student. We have a case-like studentship as well with the university. Recently as well, we've recruited someone from the group who really wanted to learn how the various tech development and commercial components come together to develop something that can be used in humans. So there's a lot of knowledge flow both ways from the technical and the commercial side.
Oh, so you're definitely inspiring people to go down the commercialization route.
Hopefully. It is a long journey and it can take a very long time, specifically in the medical or biotech field. Sometimes it's something between, 10, 15 years. It's not unheard of. Normal drug development program is about 10 years, let alone something from a patent, from medical device development to actual acquisition and exit. It is a long journey, so you have to really be in it for the long term and be motivated to do that.
What's one little snippet of advice you could give to someone that's maybe a postdoc now and they're thinking about spinning out? Like if you could just give them one little tip of wisdom.
Talk to as many people as possible who've done that, and also more senior advisors who offer their advice for free quite commonly, who've done something similar and are, at the end of their careers that could advise you. As well, you need a lot of support around you, and you need a lot of feedback whether your idea is actually any good, or who best to talk to, whether it's good enough.
Thank you so much for coming in and speaking to me today. I'm just sad that we don't have more time.
Thanks for having me.
No, it's been really great, and I'm sure people might actually have some more questions for you. So can they get in touch?
Sure, of course. They can reach out to me through LinkedIn. They can reach out to me through email. I'm still on the university email as well as a visiting academic. So I'm sure they can get in touch with you and find my contacts.
That's great. Thanks. So if you have any questions for Future Worlds or any comments about what you'd like to talk about on the next podcast, you can pop it in the comment section below or get in touch with us on any of our social media platforms.